Hello, this is another Conversations on AI podcast recording on the future of work. And with me, I've got Alysha Adams and Chris Cowton. And we're going to have an interesting conversation about where AI is taking us, the ethics of AI in the workplace, and how we should deal with it as employees, as people who are in the workplace. So, Alysha, let's start with you. And let's, if you could give us a little bit background about who you are and what you were talking about in our last meetup.
Absolutely. So I'm Alysha, and I have many hats that I wear all the time. In fact, I was at an event the other day, and someone at the end, they asked me, like, I've heard you talk about boards, but I've also heard you talk about nuclear and consultancy and this and that. They're like, what do you actually do? So I'll try and distill a little bit of my background and why this is of interest to me as well. So I run a people, culture and AI consultancy, and our specialism is on intelligence augmentation. So supporting organizations to unlock the value of AI, but through the form of the people skills that are needed for AI human partnering. I'm also a strategic advisor for startups and scale-ups, mostly helping them figure out what pragmatic people things that they need to be doing and how technology integrates. I'm also a non-exec director of a social enterprise and a trustee. And I have very multidisciplinary background and interest range, which is really where I came to converge with the subject of artificial intelligence around 5 years ago, and started researching, experimenting, and then working with others to understand its application in the workplace, because I've spent 10 years in people and culture leadership roles and could really see that kind of like foreshadowing of actually how does artificial intelligence change how we work and change the kind of talent that we need now and in the future. And that was also part of my inspiration for our conversation the other week as well. And the conversation that I wanted to bring to the table was, what happens to entry-level roles, which 32% of entry-level roles have disappeared from the UK in 2025. And actually, what does this tell us about this bigger question, which is, where do our future leaders come from in our organizations and in our industries if we are automating the runway and actually really narrowing the gap of who is getting access to our organizations. And so we kind of had a really interesting conversation about actually, what does it mean if entry-level roles sort of either disappear or reduce down significantly? What are the implications on who's allowed access and who isn't? How do you learn if you're not actually given access to the organizations that you'd be learning from and in? And there's a huge difference between task automation and role automation, and where do future talent kind of fit into that, and how can they learn? And how can we have future leaders in 5 to 10 years' time if we don't have them join our organizations today?
Well, that is very exciting topics to talk about. And I mean, the reason why the three of us are together is because we were at the last Conversations on AI open mic night, and Alysha, yourself and Chris were talking about the future of work. Now, you mentioned that you've been working in the industry, the people industry, for 10 years or so. And before AI came about, people would, traditionally enter the workspace through applying and graduate schemes and so on. How do you see that has that changed over the past 10 years? Has AI actually had an impact, in your opinion?
I actually think that it's not even just the impact of artificial intelligence, but it's actually, there's been a huge industry shifts in access to organizations, and it's become harder and harder to get your foot in the door, and then it's become more and more difficult to develop and to rise up throughout organizations. So I think it's less that there is a distinctive shift that's happened right now, and it's more that there are layers and layers of things that have made it harder and harder for people to actually enter the workforce in professional roles that are able to be developed. And that, I think that it's not a new thing that entry-level roles are disappearing. It's the pace of them disappearing. And it's also the fact that I think the skill sets that you need when you're joining organizations now are quite different to the skill sets that education leaves you with, regardless of whether it's secondary or higher education. There's a big gap there, and organizations are the ones who are either picking up the slack or feeling some of those friction points.
So basically what you're saying is that the culture has changed, and this is not a conscious change in the way that people are recruited and so on. It's more about the fact that these jobs are a little bit more amorphous. They don't exist maybe, or people or organizations are trying to do without entry-level roles.
I think we've efficiency them out. I think that's probably how I describe it. And I think that's where this sort of the Venn diagram happens when it comes to artificial intelligence. Like, AI is not the reason that 32% of entry-level roles have disappeared in the UK this year, but it is the reason why that number will only increase, because organizations are all looking at their bottom line. The landscape as a whole is incredibly competitive and is only getting more competitive. Consistent rising costs for businesses, all of these things are meaning that people are trying to save money everywhere. And this is one of those places. So it's not just that entry-level roles are being reduced because we're trying to automate them, automate the tasks that are done by entry-level roles, but actually also we're not necessarily investing in or valuing early careers talent like we used to 15 years ago or so. So there's a shift in mindset about how we view early careers talent as well.
And how do you find young people reacting to this?
Oh, how do I find? I would say that I think that there is definitely fear and concern. I think people are like, oh gosh, what does this mean for me? And I think that what's difficult is that I don't think organizations and businesses have been very good at clearly communicating what it is that they expect and need from early career talent. And I don't think that generally education systems have been very good at providing it either. So there's almost like a lack of communication between two really key parties that would set these people up for success. And as a result, they're navigating a huge amount of ambiguity. There's not pathways and there's not clarity about what's expected of them, how they're supposed to be working. You know, everyone's kind of giving different advice about what to do. Education, the value of formal education has decreased significantly, but that's also left this gap where it's like, well, how are they supposed to join your organization with experience if no one will give them experience? And that's a loop that we've seen for the last 10 years, but it's a loop that is increasing in franticness, I think, very recently as those roles decrease overall.
Yeah, and in your opinion, do you think young people should focus on certain degrees or certain skill sets to get them into the workforce, or is this one of those phases that's just going to ride itself out and then we're going to be back to the way it was?
I think that's a really good question, and I think that no one, unless they possess a really powerful sort of future orb, would be able to give you that insight. But what I would say is that different skills are having different values attributed towards them recently, and that, again, this is part of this, the organizations not necessarily knowing or communicating what these are because they themselves don't know them. But what I've been seeing in the work that I've been doing in organizations, focusing on that people, culture and AI piece, has very much been around the human skill sets, the meta skills of critical thinking, creative intelligence, self-intelligence, knowing yourself and being resilient, being able to manage your own emotions, being able to collaborate well. Those are all things that are only increasing in value for two reasons. One is because of the influx of intelligent technologies and automations and how much we're partnering with technology. It's changed what we value about human interactions, but also actually because those are the skill sets that are valuable for human AI augmentation and for that sort of intelligence augmentation piece, so that multiplying what we bring. And so I would say that technical skills have been increasing in value in the last, 20 years. Like, they're becoming more and more highly requested, but actually these human skill sets are going to become more and more valuable in organizations themselves, particularly from leaders and managers. Those are the things that we're going to be looking for. If you could choose an incredible technical manager who was a great engineer, or software engineer, or you could choose someone who has amazing people skills and can develop a team, actually for a people management role, you're more likely to want to choose option 2, because that technical expertise may be able to come from your intelligent technologies. So it's changing the role of people in the workplace and which skills are valued at what rate.
Those are really, really interesting topics, because I think, in the workplace, the technical skills are always evolving anyway. New technologies, new ways of working, and the use of AI is actually making that quite easier than before. But I do want to bring Chris into the conversation, so that then we can circle back to those skills, because those are really, really important skills at any level of your job ladder. So, Chris, you've got an illustrious career in academics and accounting, and do you want to tell us a little bit about your background? And
yeah, I've been around a while, and talking of technology, when I started work at the age of 16 in a local accountant's office, we had hand-cranked calculating machines before we had calculators on our desks. So I have a sort of a historical perspective on technology and its impact on the workplace. And in a sense, that was 50 years ago, 49 years ago, and the sense in which technologies come, they don't tend to go, they get embedded, and the way in which everything is so different, and yet so many things are still the same. And it's really interesting to listen to Alysha talking about the soft skills and the technical skills. As you said, I've been around as an academic, so I was made professor of accounting nearly 30 years ago now, and spent a nearly 10-year stint as a dean of a business school. Since then, I've sort of retired, but I do quite a lot with business and government on business ethics, and also with professional bodies, as well as continuing to write strange academic papers. And because of my work with a professional body, I've also been asked to look at AI recently, so hence my presence here and at the conversations. Really interesting, just thinking about skills generally, and the workplace, the relationship between education and industry. As long as I was dean, so I started as dean nearly 20 years ago, businesses were generally saying what we want is the soft skills. Actually, we want people who can work in teams, blah, blah, blah. And they've always said that. And universities, I think, have done a lot on that kind of work. And businesses will continue to complain about it, because basically it's people. And some people are quite good at that naturally, and some people aren't. But you can help some people to get better. And often that's a question of confidence. So I worked at Oxford for 10 years. Confidence in those days wasn't in generally short supply amongst the students, I would say, or at least there was a veneer of confidence. I also worked at Huddersfield for many years. And their students would say, well, why would they want to employ me? I come from this community in West Yorkshire. They can't jump and get a job in London because they have no finance to take them there or anything like that. So I've got to know the big thing for me, and you use the word experience, was one of the things I really invested in was the placement unit. The old idea of the sandwich degree, we'd always had it, but I really put a lot of effort into it, and the team got placement unit of the year award, which was great. But more particularly, that was what transformed, I think, a lot of our students and made them workplace ready. And I had such wonderful conversations with people from business about how good the students were, but also the transformation that the students had seen in themselves and they'd seen in them, because that's where you learn what the workplace really wants. You can talk at university about we're doing this because it's a workplace skill, and they'll go, oh, it's soft stuff. I used to teach accounting students. We want to do the numbers. You say, well, it's all about interpreting the numbers and persuading people about what these numbers mean. No, I just want to do the numbers. But you get them into a placement for 9 months or a year, and then they learn what it's all about. You can talk till you're blue in the face, simulate things in the classroom all you want. So I think that way of getting sort of decent work experience to really get people during their education to understand what the workplace looks like, which their parents might not know, or whoever looks after them, because it's ages since they entered the workplace, or maybe they don't have experience the kind of workplace that the student's looking to go to. So I think the more that we can cooperate, not just in sense of what we teach in education and what business tells about what they want, which, to be honest, businesses aren't terribly good at. I would stick my neck out and say that. I always think the real test of what business really wants is, well, what do you do with these supposedly inadequate people when they join you? What does your induction and development program look like? And if you don't do anything about those things that you say are missing, I don't believe that you were really serious about them. But that's just me being naughty and provocative. But watch the actions, don't just hear the words, I guess. So that's my kind of perspective on some of it. But my own work in particular has been particularly in recent years with professionals. So the reason I've been involved in the conversations on AI is that I designed and largely wrote the ethics CPD course for the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales.
Okay.
We've now got 11 modules in, and last year they said to me, or maybe the year before, said, Chris, would you write us a module on AI ethics for accountants, please? So I said, well, I last read a book on AI in 1979 or 1980. So not only have I been around for a long time, but the idea of AI has been, and it's always been about to take over. And so I did some work with help from people at the Institute, and we had some great round tables with people from business and the profession. Really, really instructive. And one of the things that came up, Alysha, was how do we develop future leaders in the firms? And we had some people from the Big Four there, amongst other types of firms, when the entry-level jobs won't be there. Interestingly, the accounting profession is a special case because they've always recruited more entry-level people than they've needed. So AI is actually a solution to a problem they've always had. Their problem was, how do we recruit intelligent enough people who will do not a very interesting job, at least in the early years, work very hard, but not want too much money? And the answer was, we'd also get them qualified, which provides an exit ticket because most of them can't become partners. So that's why that was basically the human resource model of audit firms for many years. It will stop being that if we're right about AI. Whether AI is yet making a big difference, I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to interpret the figures, Alysha, I think, isn't it? Because I think if you look at what's happening in recruitment, a number of companies are saying, we are not recruiting so many or any people this year because of a sluggish economy and uncertainty and AI. And you want to turn around to them and say, okay, so what percentage of the positions that you're not recruiting for is due to AI, and what percentage is due to a sluggish economy? And I think you throw AI in because it doesn't make you look quite so bad as a business. You know, we're not really struggling as much as you might think. We've got an excuse for not recruiting people now. So it's hard to interpret the figures. How much is happening now? You can see some jobs are changing. But you've got this strange thing going on at the moment. We had this thing about, we used to talk about hype and hysteria, if you're talking policy level, and, where are we really with AI? But I think the other thing we're at is we're hearing, everything I read and every meeting I go to starts with on the flyer is AI is transforming business. And yet you then look for use cases. And certainly 18 months ago when I was looking for them, there weren't that many. Now there are now, I think, but then you get the MIT research recently that says most pilot studies in AI fail. So we're not quite sure where we are. I think if AI is having a real impact on entry-level jobs, it's partly because it is affecting some entry-level jobs. I think it's also that people are holding back. And the more sticky your labour market, I was talking to someone from Germany, and basically they're not recruiting because they're afraid that in 2 or 3 years' time, these people won't be needed and they won't be able to get rid of them.
So yeah, I mean, it is a kind of a interesting times. I was going to say scary, but I'm not that scared just yet, because I think, and I'd like to bring Alysha into this. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors with return on investment for AI. I haven't seen, to Chris's point, I haven't seen any business-oriented application of it. It helps in the business place. It helps writing questions to it, helping you shape certain things, but it's not a replacement just yet. How do you see it in the people that you work with and the companies that you interact with?
I think that piece around, well, one, I'll say, Chris, your comment about AI and I said, get kind of understanding the stats is very much from an accountancy brain. So I love that. But Armin, to your question, I think that, yeah, when it comes to ROI on AI, we're in a really weird space. And that's a lot of the organizations that I partner with kind of come to the table with this sort of, they sort of say, I feel like we're doing AI, but it doesn't really feel like it's done anything for us. Like where, it feels like we've got more things on the endless list of things to do. And I'm not really seeing changes in the bottom line. Because what we've done is we've rolled it out like it's a tech system, and we've not rolled it out like it's a people and culture transformation. And for me, that's where a lot of the grey area sits, and that's where a lot of the unreturned value sits. Because what's happening is there are basic things that we've not done that would enable us to get more value from the tool. And so, for example, workflows, like the redesign of workflows. In fact, McKinsey just released a new report, I think it's called Agents, Robots and Us, the skills of the future, which was very validating because it's talking about all the things I work in. And I was like, great, thank you very much, McKinsey, for that. But what it was also saying was that we've not redesigned workflows for people plus AI plus agent plus whatever automations you're doing. All we've done is we've done our old way of working together, and then we've stacked on top these additional layers of large language models and agents and automations. So instead of you and me, Armin, partnering together and designing a brief for a client, we've now we'll use AI. So what we're both going to do is we're going to speak to a little chat bot, and we're like, oh, this thing, and then we come back together and then we discuss it and then we go away again. And what we've done is we've basically just added a step. We've actually not simplified it at all. So it's adding to that cognitive load, and that's why people are finding it harder to actually see returns. Like the amount of, when it comes to AI fluency, we've got a real gap. People aren't understanding the tools, how to utilize them well, and actually how to apply them in their context and settings, which is obviously, Chris, what your module there was about, was that like AI in the context of accounting, whereas people are learning about it at this sort of holistic top level, but not really understanding what it means in their work and their roles. So I guess what I'd say to the ROI piece is it only really has returns if you design things intentionally. So you've designed your workflow with the intelligent technologies and tools that you use in your business built in, and you've built in as well where it adds value and where it doesn't. If you need critical thinking and deep context for that subject, actually you're better off doing a really rough, ugly draft and then working on refining it, versus going and asking ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, tell me what I should do for this scenario. So it's not understanding where humans add value and where AI adds value, not building into the workflows, and also not designing or building up I call them like the meta skills. It's like sort of 3 houses of skill sets that are needed for not just partnering effectively with AI, but also for recognizing that the world that we work in is actually not designed for the brains that we have. We've still got brains that are looking for saber-toothed tigers and reacting to emails like that's what's happening. And actually the pace of change and the pace of, expectation and innovation are all things that are not aligned with our natural evolutionary psychology. And so there are different skill sets that are needed for that resilience to be able to show up and innovate and lead and support people. So those would be a few thoughts from my head.
Yeah, no, that reptilian mind kind of imagery and how it works with AI is kind of interesting. And that's where I want to bring it back to something that you mentioned earlier around human element of this, the emotional intelligence and how we work as leaders. And I often sometimes have actually used AI in helping me with emotional intelligence questions. How should I deal with this situation in a much more kind of like measured way, rather than just barge in and try to do the wrong thing. So in a sense that AI can be helpful, but can be helpful as an advisor rather than a kind of a replacement for it. How do you see that playing in a workplace, and how it helps us navigate the kind of the ebbs and flows of the workplace?
I think that's such an important point about like EQ and that human side of what it means to work in a workplace, right? Like you're collaborating with people, you're leading people, and actually it doesn't matter how amazing you are as a technical leader, you actually need to influence and bring people on journeys with you, and they don't just do it just because it's logical and you told them in an email that that's what needed to do. When I was doing the Oxford Artificial Intelligence program a few years ago, there was a lecturer who was talking about this, and they were sort of saying, the kind of question was, will artificial intelligence replace leaders in the future? And they basically scoffed, and they were like, no, because what you require from real leadership is different than just to be managed. You are being inspired, you are being uplifted, you are being developed, you're being seen. You know, like the act of feeling perceived by someone else and valued is not something that artificial intelligence can do. So I agree. I've worked with organizations, and we've used AI to build in almost like support infrastructure for emotional intelligence to create like a better baseline for that consistent experience. So helping people to designing agents to help people to design like good feedback conversations. So they want to give this feedback and they want to get this result, and it helps them to actually frame the conversation in a productive way for the other person to have that conversation. So it's a reflective tool. It can be a really useful reflective tool to stop and be like, how can I do this better? But only if you put in the right kind of prompt and the right thought behind it. But I think ultimately, like, these are also things that we are not very good at valuing in society or developing in education or workplaces. Like, we value the returns on creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, but we're not very good at cultivating them, nurturing them, or doing it intentionally. And that's a lot of what my work has ended up being, is kind of partnering with organizations and getting them to go deeper with these things, because suddenly they have much higher value. I think there was a piece of research that was done last year that was on AI-enabled roles, and they basically found that the value of like higher skills, the sort of higher human skills, so collaboration and emotional intelligence and adaptability, increased by like 50% when you added AI into the equation. So the value of them has gone up, but the development of them, there is actually a gap between the training and the application in quite a few spaces.
That's a good point about collaboration. And Chris, last week I presented at the first inaugural AI conference on the built environment, and it was interesting that you were talking about CPD in accounting. And the thing I presented was about how to do a CPD in AI in engineering, and how to use AI as a collaborator rather than devolving everything to it. How does it work in accounting? And is there a formulaic way that you can say, I'm an accountant, I understand how accountancy works, I can be a creative accountant, but this is what I want AI to do?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of things. One is, accountants do lots of different sorts of jobs. We typically think of the auditor, but most qualified chartered accountants are not auditors. They may well be working in management, financial management, all sorts of things. So it's also, I think, worth putting on the table at this point that when you come to implementing AI, actually you're not really implementing AI. You're implementing a load of things which are AI enabled or AI products. So there's lots and lots of different types of AI or elements of AI in the products you can get free, you can buy, whatever. And they do very different kinds of jobs. So I think a lot of the worry that I see about AI is the thought that AI is going to providing answers or making decisions. Interestingly, this was also the worry about an awful lot of computerized stuff going back to the 1960s, with Thomson and Schudden's comment on information systems as answer machines, but actually then pointing, and this is where a lot of debate was, how you develop techniques to, in a sense, provide decisions out of models, management science models, say, but then pointing actually a lot of information was used in different ways. It was often used to, for example, direct attention, or to provide ideas, or sometimes to provide rationalizations of things you decided already. The computer says, yes, go goody, I can do it. Yeah, but all this kind of stuff about people often have, I think, in their mind when they're thinking about these things, very different, maybe a very restricted set of roles in their mind for what the technology can do, and therefore a rather impoverished view of the human AI interaction. So put that on the table. So when it comes to accountants, what do I think? Well, I'd say my module was on AI ethics for accountants. So I knew about the accountancy bit, I knew about the ethics bit, I need to know about the AI bit. So my knowledge of AI developed at that time was just enough to really provide enough introduction to the module so that you could understand enough about AI to be able to understand what I was saying about the ethics. And it was, I suppose the learning element for me was not just the AI, but going through the process, I actually mapped it in the following way, really. Did stuff on AI, cut that back quite a lot, although I've enjoyed, preparing for it. And then it was kind of ethical risks. This is how often people talk about AI, is in terms of ethical risks, and there's some good stuff out there. And then they talk about ethical principles, the explainability and the fairness and things to counter bias and all those kind of good principles. And then obviously we've got a certain amount of legal guardrails around, whether it's the EU AI Act or indeed existing legislation like GDPR or copyright law or whatever. But when I got to then looking in more depth at sort of little case studies for people to do in the module, I found that the existing principles that accountants are supposed to abide by, that are in their fundamental principles in their code of ethics, could do most of the work I needed to do to come to a solution about their AI affected work. Now, it was only using some examples, so there are probably some examples that you'd need to use some different resources. But it's quite interesting that really the principles of integrity, which have a particular technical meaning in accounting, the principle of objectivity, principle of professional competence and due care, that confidentiality and that professional behaviour, all these gave you levers that could say an awful lot already about AI and accounting. And I think the more that AI in its different forms becomes embedded into work, the less one worries about AI ethics and the more one worries about being an accountant ethics. Mm-hmm. I think what understanding AI, and this is I think really important for skill sets, is that one of the things I often say to leadership teams is when things go wrong, it's not that people decided to be unethical. Sometimes happens. There are people who one technically calls naughty around, but it's actually because no one thought there was anything, there was an ethical issue, so they didn't notice it. So a great deal, I think, for people in professions and other occupations is actually to know the questions to ask. So they're sensitized, so they recognize when ethical issues are arising in their work. And that includes, so that basically means you've got the ethical professional foundations, so you need to have those still. I don't think AI changes those fundamentally, although technology's crept into the code of ethics a little bit. But you need to know enough about AI to be able to ask the right questions of those who are supplying you with inputs to your work, who are taking your work from you, or if you're in a senior role, asking the right questions to make sure that people are thinking through the right things, or you're buying something from a supplier, so you ask them the right kind of questions. So I think that the competence of professionals will be, certainly they'll be using AI. They will need to learn new skills to do that well. But most of it is actually, the fundamentals of the profession still apply. But it's a question of asking the right questions of yourself and of others, I think.
I'd like to do a thought experiment with you guys. Let's see if it works. I haven't tried this one before. So let's imagine a future with your crystal ball. Imagine a future that is dystopian and everything's going to go wrong. And then imagine a future that is utopian and so on. And imagine what you would do to actually, in this field that we're talking about, not in anything else, but in this field, what would you do to actually make that happen in everything that you've been talking about? So Alysha, tell us about the dystopia, tell us about the utopia, and what is it that you would think we need to do to get us to a better place?
So my dystopia for the workplace is we design organizations and roles that are in service of technology. So we are the bodies and the extra limbs that are enabling artificial intelligence to do its thing, and we see ourselves as serving it, and that it is all-knowing, and therefore we are subservient to it. So that would be kind of my dystopian version of the workplace. And we don't value people, and we don't think that things like resilience matters. We're not interested in the human brain. We're only interested in people from the perspective of have we created, true super intelligence, and what does quantum AI look like? And it's only what we can produce for the service of increasing technology. So that would be my dystopian future. My utopian version would be that we have created organizations and industries that are our people are multiplied by artificial intelligence. So the value of them is multiplied, but also the space that we actually use artificial intelligence to create genuine capacity and space in our work that enables us to do many things, including have deeper strategic thinking, have better resilience, be happier, and be able to focus on human connection and interactions, and that is something that is valued in our organizations. So we build the human skill sets that are needed for effective AI partnering, but with the purpose of it being an amplifier of us and our people, and we invest in those relationships. And the value that it brings is not to just increase the pace of everything, but actually to give genuine returns when it comes to strategic thinking, relationship building, and that kind of wider interconnectedness of people. So those would be my two versions.
What are you going to do to get us to utopia?
So I think that part of it, and I think we've sort of alluded to it in this conversation, is there is a feeling of pace, right? Like everyone sort of feels like they're slightly behind when it comes to the conversations of artificial intelligence, particularly in organizations, particularly with the CEOs and founders and CPOs that I work with. That there is a knowledge that they need to be doing it, and lots of them are doing it, but they're not really sure if they're doing the right thing. They're just sort of, I've sort of termed it like it's like you leave, I don't know, an event, and you see all these runners running, like they're doing the marathon, and you're like, oh, everyone's running, I better run as well. They start running along, they're really, really getting to it. And I'm like, I sort of say, my role is to like grab your arm and say, hey, before you go run this marathon, let's do some training. Like, let's figure out whether you want to run this marathon, what style you're going to do. Let's make sure you don't have any stress fractures, and let's go and have a cup of tea and have a conversation about it. And then we can get an Uber to the finish line, and you'll arrive at the same time as everyone else, but you'll actually have gotten there intentionally. And I think that in the desire to keep up, what we need to make sure that leaders do is stop, evaluate what it is that they're trying to achieve through their use of artificial intelligence, where that positions them in the market, how it's going to disrupt them, what sort of talent they need, what kind of culture do they need to enable this organization that they say they want to be, and how are they going to take tangible steps to get there, and design the right culture, the right workflows, the right processes that actually take you from, I don't know what artificial intelligence is, to this is actually something that's unlocking value in our people. But I think without that intentionality of the design of how we work with artificial intelligence, and without the valuing and understanding that actually artificial intelligence has limitations that humans have real skill sets in, and that we should be investing in those human skill sets, that actually you can just end up running a marathon that you didn't even mean to run, and you don't get results. So that's how I think you could accidentally get to the dystopia, is we end up efficiency and optimizing everything with the goal of AI without the goal being people. So human-centered design of organizations would be, I think, that mixed point. And that's, a big part of my work, is helping people unpack what that means for them.
Well, that's great stuff, and I think hopefully we can get there with your help. I'll tell you about my dystopia, and then we'll get on to Chris. So a couple of years ago, when LLMs came out, we were trialing them at work, and I won't name the company, but we were trialing one of these LLMs, and we had it recording our meetings, and it would afterwards you can ask it, so how did Armin do in this meeting? And it would say, well, Armin was very friendly and very considerate and very polite, and got Vince, one of my colleagues, to actually do what he wanted them to do without being aggressive. And it was, oh my God, that is. And then we said, how did, and I'm not going to name his name, but how did Mr. X do? And he said, well, he was very rude, and he swore in the meeting, and he was very aggressive. And what it meant was that people were actually being measured against a developer's idea of what a meeting should be like. Somebody who's sitting in California or Seattle is deciding what is emotionally a good meeting in the UK. And these cultural kind of like harmonization is a dystopia for me. So yeah, that's my view. Chris, what do you think?
Well, I mean, following on from that, Armin, maybe a dystopia is where irony is not understood.
Yes.
Dystopia. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to plan the dystopia of the future. I would like to keep a historical perspective on this, partly because it's been around a long time, but I think history teaches a lot, or at least gives us pause for thought. So, yeah, we're at a funny moment in AI. AI's come quite a long way, and it's got a lot further to go. I think particularly the last 3 years, what was it, November 2022, was it, when ChatGPT was launched? So, yeah, no matter how many errors it makes, in a sense, and it's pretty flipping amazing, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, now my tech problems, I just ask Copilot, how do I sort this out in PowerPoint or Excel, or is there a formula for this? And it's pretty good. If I prompted it better, it would tell me right first time. Last time I'd tell it it's out of date, get your act together. Yeah, but we have a little chat and it solves my problems for me. So isn't it brilliant? So this sounds rather a wonderful future, right? Not heading towards dystopia. I think maybe what we're seeing in terms of, certainly when it comes to automation and the human-machine interface, is remember we've had a long relationship with machines. And if you want to see dystopia, maybe see the kind of upheavals that took place with the invention of the factory system, which in a sense created modern organizations, because previously people weren't hybrid, they just worked at home. They had their spinning wheel, they had their weaving frame in parts of Yorkshire that I lived in, or they farmed or whatever. So we've been through a very odd short term in terms of human history of these large organizations, and of course the people were there to tend the machines. So they'd always had machines which helped them, but now they were there to tend the machines, and those machines had to run and they had to be repaired, and it wasn't the machines that got things wrong, it was people that got things wrong, and this was pretty exploitative. So I think, you know, we've had warnings about the relationship between machines, but that was particularly for people who used their hands. And now we're moving to people who don't use their hands, apart from typing on keyboards. But you know what I mean? And maybe we need to reflect on maybe what parts of our society have already been through, and maybe to some extent still have to cope with. And it's the talking classes who are now being affected, I think, much more directly by AI. We're still a way off some of the remaining things that require presence being AI. So I obviously don't know much about hairdressing, as you can tell, but are we going to get hairdressers replaced by AI in the near future? I suspect not, but who knows? So the dystopia, I think we've got lessons about dystopia and how it might be temporary. We might go through some really bad times, or certain sections of societies may go through some really tricky times before we work out how we should really be doing it. But my dystopia is more actually about who controls AI, or who uses AI for malevolent purposes. So yeah, organizations can treat their workers badly sometimes, but usually there's a feedback loop, and kind of we get there in the end. It doesn't mean everyone's got sweet light in their working life, but my worries are more macro than that, I think. Either whether it's malevolent regimes, or it's leaving everything to be led by the tech sector, which isn't meant to be an anti-tech sector thing. And so I think there's amazing things going on, but we've got to remember they see technology as the thing. And also there's huge sums of money going in. So some people have been doing calculations recently. If you add up all the investments and you think about what's a reasonable rate of return, how much profit are these investments going to have to generate every year, and where's the income stream currently? So there's all sorts of forces building up, some of which will involve a shakedown in the AI sector. Clearly, I mean, if you talk to people who work in AI, they're worried about not just the stock market crash. They're worried that they won't get to IPO or bought out before they go bust. So everyone's desperately trying to find revenue. So the people who are kind of leading on this are maybe have certain motivations. Utopia was, I think, an ironic or satirical thing when Thomas More wrote it. So let's use it in the more everyday sense. Well, I mean, obviously, one of the things that all the technology offers us is the ability to do jobs that we don't find particularly interesting, and to do them for us. So it's going to replace a lot of the boring stuff. So the National Foundation for Educational Research had a report out recently that says, it's going to be customer service stuff. It's going to be basic admin. It says secretarial work. I didn't realize there were any secretaries still, certainly not where I lived and worked. But that's already been hit a lot by us doing our own admin, I guess. But so there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be affected. But ultimately, some of the less interesting jobs, stuck in an office doing something not very interesting, look like they're going to go. So that could be seen as utopian. The loss of certain types of jobs isn't actually a bad thing, as long as there are worthwhile and meaningful jobs for people to do elsewhere. But then we're short of carers, we're short of nurses, we're short of all sorts of things. So how would that utopia come about? Probably not by an individual deciding how it should come about. I think there's two really important things. One is that we think in our jobs with AI, we reflect on what we're doing, the right people are thinking and not just the same people talking. And then that thinking gets into our power structures, whatever they may be, because there's a great danger that there's lots of good thinking going on, but unless it's by the people who actually hold power and hold it with a generally goodwill, I think we're stuck. But I think my general approach is much more, I guess, bricolage, in the sense of making it up as we go along, because I think we can't chart it out. So we don't really know what AI is going to be doing. We know with every wave of technology, it's going to take everything over and at the same time ruin our lives somehow. And what happens is technology can do things, but it doesn't mean it should or does do things. And the other thing, of course, is quite often the technology turns out to do something very different from what today we're sitting here envisaging. Take text messages. No one thought when SMS was invented that within a couple of years there would be billions sent each year. And yet that transformed into personal communications for people. And what will AI actually end up being used for? I think there's lots of cases. I know people who are using it in some very interesting ways at the moment. But what will be the dominant use of strands of AI? I think it's quite hard to predict. But we need democratic structures, in a sense, which enable the right sort of debates to take place in real time, not talking heads doing question time type mouthing off about AI.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you that in 10 years' time, if we were to listen to this podcast, they'll be like, what were these guys even talking about? The future is bright. Don't worry about it. I just want to ask one last question before we close, and that's about leadership. So in organizations, you often find leaders who are either don't know much about AI, they've heard it as a buzzword, or they know about AI and they demand something to happen within the organization about AI, or are actually quite technically good at it, and they're forging ahead. How do you see the role of a leadership, not just technically bringing AI into the workplace, but actually fostering a collaborative and a harmonious workplace with AI? What do you think, Alysha?
So, really leaning to my wheelhouse there, I would say that I think that with leadership, what the interesting parallels of these kind of two groups, one who doesn't really know what it is, but knows that they should probably know what it is, and the other one who says, we must have it, but doesn't give clarity on quite how or what or with what purpose, is that really, like, we're just faced with continuously in all spaces so much like unknowns. Like, as leaders, all you're trying to do is to navigate the unknown and to try and make intelligent decisions for what's next. And so when we're thinking about like how to implement and how to make it useful, that's why I talk a lot about that missing piece of the puzzle, which is the people and culture. You're not just bringing in a tool, you are bringing in a tool that you want people to use. So if you just, into the metaphorical room, if you just bring artificial intelligence, it just sits in the corner unless you've taught people or you've created the right context for people to experiment with it, to use it how you want to. A big thing that I get a lot of people say to me is, I want AI to help us innovate. And I said, that's great, love that. Love an innovative company. But actually, artificial intelligence is probably not the thing that's going to innovate for you. It's going to be the thing that enables innovation. But actually there is an enabler before that, which is if you want people to experiment with AI and to figure out how it works for their particular context and how they should use it as individuals, as teams, you need psychological safety. Like, it's the basics of leadership. So you need psychological safety, you need a clear comms plan and a vision for how you're using it. And you need to be able to dispel and speak to the fears of your people, which is, am I going to be replaced by this technology? If I do it too well, am I going to get erased out because actually I've gotten it to automate all the things that were meaningful that I did in my job? So, you know, and that's where that you have to tell not just stories about how you're using it and why you're using it, but give clear signals, you know, invest in the people, invest in the time they spend together. So I think that would be some of my thinking on it is, you know, you need to understand what it is you want to do with the technology, and you need to communicate that clearly. And then you also need to understand that there are cultural and human elements that come into how people will or won't use it, and that will either give you great ROI or terrible ROI, and it's kind of up to you in terms of those cultural enablers to make that decision.
No, that's great stuff. Chris, what do you think?
Well, I think, you know, leadership, as we always keep reminding ourselves, can come from anywhere, can't it? But I think if we think about top leaders, so senior executives, what do they need to do? Well, I think they need to understand something about AI, and particularly AI in their industry. And the question is, how do they get that understanding? Who would be a trusted purveyor of information and understanding to them? You don't necessarily phone up your usual strategy consultant to teach you about AI, for example. So assuming Alysha's busy, where on earth do you go? So I think that's one thing they've got to sort out for themselves. Boards and senior executive teams have got to sort out how much they need to know about AI so that they can ask the right questions. And I think if they're serious about doing something on AI, what you want to avoid is the general vague statements that don't mean anything, just frighten people. AI is going to transform our business. Now, just pick that up off a conference leaflet, but that just frightens people. What, you know, so what are you going to do, as you were saying, Alysha? So I think you can set up, you know, working parties, committees, whatever, give people executive responsibility for AI. You can set up AI policies, but I think that the great danger is that becomes separated from your strategy, your values, your purpose, your code of ethics. So by all means, have a special focus on it, but not a focus that's totally separated from all the, otherwise it won't get into the workplace strategy or anything like that. I think, remember though, that leadership particularly can come from quite junior people who have got better expertise. Sometimes, you know, they'll have joined from, you know, I think about this in the accountancy profession, you know, people from the Big Four who have made quite a lot of progress with this, but cautiously for good regulatory reasons. They will then join, some of them will join smaller practices and say, okay, so what are we doing with this? And then everyone will say, what do you mean? You say, well, where I was before, I did the following. So, you know, this diffusion will take place. But I think if you think about any major strategic change, where's the big problem? And it's middle management. So leadership through the middle is crucial to really, I think, extracting value. And often they're the most threatened. So I think people in the early stage of their careers, of course, they want to get off to a good start, but, you know, I'll do 2 or 3 years here, get some work experience, then I'll think about what I really want to do. You're a middle manager, you're on a fairly good salary, you've geared up the mortgage, you've got the lifestyle, and suddenly you're thinking, is this layer going to go? We've got 5 layers, is it going to go to 4? Are they going to reduce the headcount? And I'm just so pressured anyway from above and below. So I think I'd be really interested to see over the years to come how people sort out, in the context of change enabled by AI, what happens with middle managers, because they're so often forgotten.
Of course, yeah. Look, we could have a whole podcast on middle managers, and that would be fascinating. But we're running out of time, and it's been a fascinating conversation. Really enjoyed your views and thoughts, Alysha and Chris, and we're going to let the conversations continue and see you guys next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Armin. Thank you, and thank you, Alysha, too.
You guys okay? And everything went well?
All good, all good. Do you feel like you've got some interesting things to pull out from there, Armin?
Yeah, I think there was only one blooper that I'll edit that out. Other than that, I think it was good.
Well, hopefully it's whether people find it engaging, and they'd be interested to see the comments that are left.
Yeah, yeah.
If one dares. It said about sort of, if we watch this in 10 years' time, that's usually about the time it takes me to bring myself to watch or listen to myself. Actually, after a few months, I managed to do it. But
I think you should get AI to summarize it, and that
yeah.
Might be more traumatizing.
She was very nice, but that Chris was very aggressive.
Oh,
Excellent.
guys. Well, this was really interesting. What a fun and unusual way to spend a Friday evening.
Yeah, let's write it. Oh yeah.
Yeah. But no, really fabulous to hear both your thoughts on that. And
we're recording another one on regulation policy. That's Stella's doing that one. And then we're going to publish and another one on poetry.
oh,
We're going to do a poetry special where we're going to have 3 poets reading their own poetry about AI, and I'm going to read a poem made by AI about AI.
oh,
I did think about doing that by 6 years. I publish poetry on accounting.
Oh, okay, all right.
You know, a good journal, but it's not a good poetry journal. It's a good accounting journal.
Okay.
So I've got. So I haven't. I've been wondering about a poem on AI in accounting. It's probably based. The old joke would be that. I mean, years ago, I was lecturing in the engineering department at Oxford, trying to teach them some of the engineers thing about accountancy. And there's this big lecture series, and someone came in the back and shouted down to me, "Is this artificial intelligence?" This is 30 years ago, right? And I just shouted back, "No, it's the real thing." And he just walked out. She left.
Send me your poem. If you put together a poem, send it to me and be mine.
Yes, I haven't decided on the form or the content yet, but it's nearly finished.
Ask AI. It'll be good.
Yes, but my point, Armin, was let us know when things are
absolutely when
schedule so that we can, talk about it, and then obviously use that as an in for the Feb. Is there a Feb?
There's going to be a February one on natural sciences.
Yeah,
and I'm sure there'll be stuff on LinkedIn and
yes, we're going to publish this and
repost stuff. So it'll get out to both my followers really quickly.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. Good evening.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good weekend. Bye.